Joining us right now to discuss former EPA Regional Administrator Judith Enck. Judith, so good to see you. I mean, it's been more than a month since the train derailment in East Palestine, but then I also recall, East Palestine rather, but I also recall while there was an effort to move contaminants, there were also, people who were upset, expressed, they didn't want it, coming to the waste disposal places in their states. So what is to happen? Otherwise, this stuff just sits there. So it's a problem if it moves. It's a problem if it stays. What should be happening?
Well, it doesn't just sit there. Volatile organic compounds off gas and make local air quality even worse. Some of this material, ironically, was slated to go to a nearby hazardous waste incinerator called Heritage in the very same county where East Palestine is located. Mm-hmm. So the residents would basically get a double hit of toxic exposures because that incinerator has a long record of environmental law violations. There's no easy solutions to what do you do with all of this contaminated soil and contaminated materials, which is why we really need to move upstream. This is just going to get worse because unless we pass new laws, plastic production is slated to double in the next 20 years, which means more chemicals on the rails, including vinyl chloride, which is, the real problem here.
And I want to ask you more about plastics in a moment, but what do you mean, it's time to move upstream?
Sure. What I mean is we need to stop producing so much petrochemicals. All of the chemicals used to make plastics and other products, there are often alternatives. So you can draw a direct line between plastic production and the toxic train disaster in Ohio. And the petrochemical industry has not done a good job in the communities where they're manufacturing plastics, such as Texas, Louisiana, and Appalachia. Transport is part of the picture here, and I think the tragedy in East Palestine reminds us all we've got to look for alternatives to plastics.
And that is something in the long term, because that's certainly not going to happen overnight, especially with people's reliance on plastics, whether it's to keep their food fresh and all that. You object to that?
I disagree. There are alternatives to plastics today. We don't need a space age breakthrough. There's metal, there's glass, there's cardboard, all can be made from recycled material and could more easily be recycled, unlike plastic, which only has a 5 to 6% recycling rate. There are alternatives to plastics, and I think what Ohio illustrates for us is the huge amount of toxic chemicals used to make plastics. And remember, vinyl chloride was declared a human carcinogen in 1974. That's why we need EPA to ban it.
So you're saying there are alternatives that are right now. So what is stopping companies, manufacturers from using the alternatives that are available right now, like you say, certain metals and glass?
Well, one thing is because plastics is really cheap. And so a lot of companies will keep using it. And second, there's a real lack of political will in Congress, at the EPA, in the Biden administration to really prompt this shift. Some companies are doing it on their own, but not nearly as many as we need to avoid yet another East Palestine.
And is it your feeling that it's just going to be, the will of manufacturers, that it is something that you really can't regulate or legislate?
Well, they have enormous political influence, the chemical industry, the plastics industry, the fossil fuel industry. But I also know that the American people want less plastics. We didn't vote for so much plastic every time we enter the supermarket. So there are states and local governments that are taking action. We've got the science. What we're missing is the political will to affect change. That political will is needed to make sure that more and more people don't go through this tragedy that the residents of East Palestine are going through right now. You can draw the direct line between plastic production, use and disposal, and what we are seeing unfolding. And sadly, and my heart really goes out to the people living in Ohio and Pennsylvania who are still struggling with this. They deserve better. And I think if they were given a choice to use less plastic and avoid this crisis, I have no doubt they would say less plastic, less toxic contamination.
All right. Judith Enck, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.